Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. My name is Marcus Brennan. My friends call me Mark, but never Marky. There's always some obnoxious drunk, some jerk who doesn't know me and wants to be more familiar than he deserves, and he'll always call me Marky. So Marky, what do you do for a living? I tell him I created a neat little device that police officers can just point at you from 40 feet away and determine if you're drunk. They've started attaching them to radar guns all over the city. That usually stops them. Although, in case you haven't already guessed, no such device actually exists. I guess you can tell I don't tolerate fools very well. Fool me and it gets worse. I'm not a complicated person. In fact, I love the simple life. I like my job. I'm an engineer at a large tech company with offices all over the country. I have friends. I don't drink much, but I can have a beer once in a while. Truth be told, I prefer nachos, but that's my struggle. If I get out of control, I'll gain weight. I need to keep this in check, so I struggle and stay in reasonable shape for someone my age. I used to sail every chance I got, but a wife and 2 young daughters take up a lot of a person's time, and I soon sold the boat. This is just one of life's little sacrifices I made many years ago, and I did it gladly so that I could have time to spend with those I care about. I have been happily married to Vanessa, a high school English teacher, for 25 years. Our 2 girls are in college. Olivia attends Stanford in California, and her younger sister Sophia attends the University of Washington in Seattle. I doubt I could afford those schools, but the girls are serious students and have received some exceptional scholarships. We live in Washington State, in the east side suburbs of Seattle, in a neighborhood built around some very good universities and the best high-tech firms. It's a great place to live and work. I would tell you about the local coffee culture, but I just get caffeinated thinking about it. I was a little disappointed when the girls decided to go to different colleges, but I think they needed to spread their wings a bit, and in the long run, that's a good thing. The girls are great. They're smart, funny, outgoing girls with a strong sense of right and wrong. I worry every day about their safety, but I don't worry about their choices. Seeing them grow up and take their first steps toward independence meant that my wife and I would finally have time to ourselves again. I've been looking forward to these days for a long time. When both girls left for college, I dreamed of coming home every night to a loving wife who would give me her attention, and I hers, and life would go on, one joyous day after another. We could be like newlyweds again. We would go out to dinner, see plays, go to the movies, and finally be reunited the way I always wanted to be. But it didn't quite work out that way. Truth be told, in the first year of our empty nest, Vanessa began to change. Her interests were drifting away from me, or so it seemed. It happened gradually, but over time it became noticeable. I wrote it off as her having a chance to blossom when the girls left. But over time I realized that I was observing a fundamental change in her values and priorities. Vanessa teaches English with an emphasis on creative writing. To be honest, and I hope rightly so, she's a frustrated writer. As a young mother and teacher, she never had time to write the way she wanted to. Vanessa wrote all summer and whenever she could spare an hour or two, but nothing much came of it. She regularly submitted essays and short stories to literary magazines, accumulating only a vast collection of rejection letters, and the major work never came to be. Honest, I love reading what my wife writes, but as a writer, she's never gotten beyond formulaic and often melodramatic stories. She has a romantic notion of what a writer should be, and I suspect, not that I've ever told her this, that she's more attracted to the idea of being a writer than to writing itself. No matter. If she's happy, I'm happy. For most of our marriage, Vanessa has been a member of a writers' group of one sort or another. These are people who get together to help each other criticize, suggest, and discuss their work to make each other better. Some of the groups seemed really productive to me, while others seemed more like mutual admiration societies. Her last group, which was her current group when things fell apart, had both. They took turns getting together at each other's houses, and when they were here, I tried not to draw attention to myself. I tried to participate once, but it drew disapproving looks from Vanessa and some of the others, and I gave up trying. Vanessa's current writing group has about 10 people in it, and there are both men and women among them. Some of them I like, others I'd go my whole life without seeing again. Half of them are unassuming, and half of them make a very definite impression when you meet them. Miriam, a woman, really enjoys writing stories and biographies. She does real research and writes books that have a strong academic focus but still try to keep the reader engrossed. I've read them all and really enjoyed them. That's what I told her. Gwen loves to write fantasy. I don't think she imagines herself to be the next J.K. Rowling. She's more like a talking unicorn, but she's pleasant and seems to write mostly for her own enjoyment. Who can deny that? Stuart is a know-it-all. A little of that can drag on, but in all other respects he seems okay. And then there's Derek. The first time I met him, alarm bells went off in my head, and they haven't stopped ringing since. When I was introduced to Derek, and I was definitely given to understand that I was being introduced to him, and not the other way around, he said, "So Marky, what do you do?" I looked at my wife, who pursed her lips and shook her head, and simply said, "Engineer." "Derek," I said. What was that? A smile or a smirk? I've already told you that I'd given up trying to participate in their gatherings, but I try to be out of sight and out of mind, but not out of sound. When they come over, I work quietly in the next room or on the back deck with the window open until they forget I'm there. I've noticed from the beginning that when Derek interacts with Vanessa, it's like they have their own personal banter. Sometimes he inflates her ego, and other times he seems to know her thoughts with a kind of intimacy that doesn't sit right with me. He refers to past conversations, and I get the impression that the rest of the group doesn't remember anything about them. It just seems that way to me, but I don't like it, and I've mentioned it to her. She just brushed off my concerns, and I know it's best not to push her. I made sure she knows how I feel about it. The rest is up to her. The group has its own pattern of meetings. After a work session, the group sits around a table, has some wine, and relaxes. That's when I find out that some of them are just faking it. It was the middle of the spring semester, early March, when the conversation turned to the lifestyle of real writers. "Oh, all the great writers were alcoholics," someone said. "Really, they write in the morning and drink in the afternoon and evening. It relaxes the brain for new ideas, and then in the mornings their creative juices flow and they write. Actually, all the really great writers had love affairs. That was their real inspiration," Derek said. "Thank you, Derek. I got your number at that moment." Vanessa tied a knot in my stomach. "Oh, I know. It's in the passion and excitement of the unknown, the thrill of hiding it all from other people's eyes that the real inspiration lies." Some of them laughed and some of them didn't, so I told myself it was just a joke. But I kept my eyes on them the rest of the evening. "Maybe we should all have a night of fun sometime, and then we'll write the great American novel," Stuart said. I couldn't tell if he was joking or not. Character flaws are not the basis of great writing. Humanity, compassion, and the challenge of the unknown are what great stories are built on, Gwen said. I told you I liked her. Great stories are about facing hardship, striving for greatness against the odds, and making the world a better place than it used to be. Well, maybe if you cast the right spell, we'll save ourselves all that trouble, Derek said again. To his shame, some of the group seemed to find it amusing. I doubt Gwen did, and I suspect Miriam didn't either. Their conversation continued about this writer's drinking habits and that writer's mistresses, and I continued to listen without giving anything away. Then I caught on to an interesting topic. Is anyone else applying for the Illinois Writers' Workshop this summer? Derek asked. Oh, I've already applied. I hope I get accepted. 6 weeks to just write and socialize with writers. This could be a real change for me, Vanessa said. It was the first I'd heard of it. Derek picked up on it right away. I'm sure they'll let you in. You've gotten a lot better at writing in the last year. I know you'll be accepted. I've applied too, but I'm not sure I'll be accepted. My radar picked up. Really, Derek? Since when have you been so humble? I didn't like what I was hearing, but at that moment, I still loved and trusted my wife. When you've been married as long as we have, trust becomes fundamental. You don't ask yourself, maybe she's misbehaving. That thought doesn't cross your mind. Marriage is a team, and your partner is your better half. She proves her loyalty year after year, and all you hope for is that she gets the success and fulfillment she deserves. At least that's what you think. And then it all comes crashing down when you find out that your trust has been betrayed. As time passed, I allowed myself to forget that night's conversation. Like I said, I trusted my wife. Some young guys will never realize this, but after more than 2 decades of marriage, trust is as much a way of life as a choice. It was late April and I was working in the garden. Deciding I'd had enough for the day, I headed into the house. As I reached for the kitchen door, I heard my wife on the phone. I can't wait. 6 whole weeks with no responsibilities, no commitments, and no one waiting for me to come home. That last phrase was memorable. I froze and listened. I know. This is going to be the most leisurely 6 weeks of my life. I owe it to myself, and so do you. Nothing about this pleased me. I opened the door and stepped into the kitchen. Vanessa was flabbergasted. Well, I have to go. Mark is already here, and I need to start dinner. She quickly hung up the phone. Who was that? I asked. Oh, that was Miriam. We were talking about school ending soon. Like hell it was, I thought. I wanted to ask her about the specific things she'd said, especially that no one waiting for me to come home part, but I felt like the truth wouldn't come out today. My mood turned somber, but I did my best to hide it. Later, after dinner, the second shoe dropped. Mark, there's no way you'll ever guess what great news I got today. Remember that writer's workshop in Illinois I applied for? No. Oh, of course you remember. You never listened to me. Truth be told, I was well aware of that workshop, but only because I'd overheard her talking about it that night over a month ago. No, I don't think you ever told me about it. Yes, I did. I applied for a 6-week writing workshop. It runs from mid-June through the end of July at the University of Illinois. Professors lecture there, they invite great writers to lead workshops and discussion groups, and then we write. It's a great opportunity, and I've been accepted into the program. That sounds great, honey. I'm sure we can afford it. Maybe I can carve out some time and join you. I'd love to hear some of these writers speak. That remark seemed to take her by surprise. Oh, well, we can try. It would be a very intense 6 weeks, and I wouldn't have much time to spend with you. My internal alarm went off again. Well, you know I'm easygoing, and maybe I could be the guy who brings coffee for the group. She smiled a nervous, confused smile. That would be wonderful, dear. We'll see what happens. I'd encountered this kind of deflection before, and I knew what it meant. She was going to make sure I never went to Illinois to join her. I have a feeling you'd rather I didn't go with you. Oh no, that's not it. I'm just afraid you'll be bored. You love your computers and engineering work, and here it's just a bunch of writers musing about big ideas. I didn't say it out loud, but mentally I shouted it so the neighbors could hear. I'm really not stupid, honey. Oh, that's not what I meant. It's just that your mind likes to work on details, while writers struggle with the big questions of life. I bit my tongue. I didn't say it out loud. I knew when someone was trying to marginalize me. I'm sure you'll succeed, I said. Later that night, after Vanessa went to bed, I got on the internet to look at our phone records. Our carrier allows you to do that. All incoming and outgoing calls are logged, along with text messages. I checked the call log, and it turns out that the call I'd interrupted was not from Miriam. Or if it was from Derek's phone. It's amazing how quickly trust can break down after 25 years of marriage when you catch your wife in a lie and find her plotting to exclude you. Weeks went by and all she talked about was the seminar. I tried several times to engage her in the idea that I might go with her or visit her at some point, but she rejected the idea each time. Then she went from reasoning to manipulation. Mark, I have the most wonderful news. I got you 2 tickets to a fishing camp in northern Canada at the end of June. You can take Jake, and the 2 of you can fish for those huge salmon you're always talking about. It costs a fortune, but I wanted to thank you for your support about the writer's workshop, and I felt guilty that you wouldn't enjoy it. So I want you to go and have fun, and then we can compare notes when I get home. I smelled a rat. Thank you, sweetie. That was very thoughtful of you. Truth be told, I'd have more fun with you. Mark, we've been over this. It just doesn't make sense. I'll be working all the time, and I'll feel guilty for ignoring you so much. I stared at her face and eyes for a minute, trying to figure out what I was seeing there. Was it condescension? Thanks, honey. It looks like it's going to be fun in Canada. I said it without much enthusiasm. Options were running through my head. An unexpected visit to Illinois was at the top of the list. Well, you could at least smile when you say that. Those tickets cost a lot of money, and I want you to be happy. Okay, sounds like fun. I went down to the basement to work on some things for the rest of the evening. Our house is older, and it has one of those floor grates in the hallway. It allows warm air to come up from the furnace room and was originally used to heat the first floor. When we first moved in, I tried not to step on it, but after a while I got used to it and forgot it was there. The phone is in the hallway too. I was working quietly in the basement and contemplating my next steps when I heard Vanessa on the phone. Yes, I gave him the tickets. He's still resisting. I don't know. I keep telling him he won't like it. No, I can't directly tell him to stay home. I know, and I want that too, but at the end of the day, I want to stay married. I just want him to give me some space to enjoy myself for a few weeks. I deserve that, don't I? Yeah, I want to spend those weeks with you too. Okay, just leave it alone for a while. I think he'll come to his senses. Okay, baby, I miss you too. Write something nice for me tonight. With those words, she hung up the phone. My heart raced in my throat. I'm not stupid. I recognize cheating when I hear it. Either Vanessa was having an affair, or she was planning one. Anything less, and she'd have a long time to explain herself. It took me 20 minutes to gather my thoughts, but I knew at this point I needed to become the liar I'd always despised. At the very least, I needed to keep my cards to myself until I figured out what I was going to do. I called upstairs, and in my most loving voice said, "Vanessa, I'm going over to Jake's house to tell him the good news." "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. Have fun." And with those words, I walked out the basement door. I needed to stay away, and Jake was just an excuse, but after thinking about it, I realized that I needed someone to talk to. Jake had been my best friend since we were in high school. "You've got to be kidding me," Jake said. "I don't believe it. She would never cheat on you." "Well, she's certainly doing her best to keep me out of that workshop, and she calls someone baby, and it sure isn't me." We just sat there in silence. That's a big part of what a guy needs from another guy. Just to sit next to each other and share the pain. You have to talk to her about it, Mark. You can't spend the next 2 months thinking the worst and not knowing anything. And what's she going to tell me? How much do you want to bet that tonight, when I checked the phone records, it wasn't Miriam she was talking to? It wasn't Miriam she was calling baby. And it wasn't Miriam she was scheming with. I'm sorry. I'm not taking that bet. What are you going to do? I'm going to sit down and talk it over. That's what you do after 25 years. I'm going to tell her how much I love her. Tell her I'm hurt that she doesn't want me to go with her. And ask her head on what she has planned that she doesn't want me around for. Do you think she'll tell the truth? No. But I'll tell her the truth. And part of it won't be what she wants to hear. She'll know I love her. She'll know that cheating on me will cause us to break up. And then she'll try to convince me that it's all in my head and that I should go fishing. I paused for a moment. By the way, I have 2 tickets to a fishing camp in northern Canada at the end of June, and one of them is for you. Nice. Jake caught himself. I mean, I'm here for you, buddy. I had to laugh. I'd never doubted his loyalty. We sat around for the next 3 hours, talking and drinking a little bit at a time, and then I headed home. After dinner the next evening, I asked Vanessa to sit with me in the living room and told her everything that was on my mind. Well, I told her almost everything. I still had a few secrets left. Honey, I'm very concerned. I don't think you've been completely honest with me about the writer's workshop. I overheard you talking to the writing group back in March, but you never told me about it until you started planning the trip. I even heard you and others talk about how all great writers have affairs, and I admit I didn't think it was very funny. You talked about your trip with Derek, but when I ask about it, you lie to me and say it was someone else. You know how I feel about that guy. And when you said you were accepted, you seemed to purposely push me away and didn't want me to join you. I don't need to be there, but I wanted to join you on this adventure. Then, instead of considering taking me along, you basically obligated me to be elsewhere, so I have no choice. You never discussed the idea with me. You just made plans for me. It sounds like you're trying to guarantee that I won't be in your way while you're in Illinois. I don't think you've been completely truthful with me, and I'm beginning to doubt that you've been completely faithful. Mark, I've never treated you that way, and I would never cheat on you. What is wrong with you? You are my husband, and I just want you to enjoy yourself. It hurts me that you feel that way about me. I can't help how I feel, and I can't ignore what makes me think that way. You know that I love you. I've loved you since we met, but I could never get over betrayal. Is this what you have planned, Vanessa? Is this writer's workshop your vacation from our marriage? That was it. There was no more discussion or real conversation. She broke into a screaming fit and spent the rest of the night either yelling at me or staring at me in silence. For the entire next week, she was cold. She went on the offensive, hollering at me, punishing me until I backed off. It wasn't helping. More than that, it convinced me that I was right. However, I wasn't making any progress, so in the end I let her think she'd won. If she was going to cheat, there was nothing I could do to stop her. In fact, that phone call I'd overheard said that she'd already made up her mind. I ended up thanking her sarcastically for the upcoming fishing trip, but my mood darkened and didn't lift again until I knew what I had to do. Once she got her way, she quickly shifted gears and started playing the loving wife to reinforce my desired behavior. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and it only heightened my suspicions. I know what manipulation is when I fall victim to it. I began to notice other things. She was on her phone more often, texting someone and smiling at the screen. When I'd walk into the room, she'd quickly put the phone away. She started going out more often. Errands, she'd say, but she'd be gone for hours. When I asked where she'd been, she'd give vague answers or get defensive. One night in early May, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for some water and noticed Vanessa's laptop open on the kitchen table. She'd left it unlocked. I know I shouldn't have, but I looked. Her email was open, and there it was, an email from Derek. Can't wait for Illinois. 6 weeks of uninterrupted time together. Your husband doesn't suspect a thing, does he? My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the thread. There were dozens of emails going back months. Flirtatious messages, plans to meet up, expressions of affection. They were careful not to be too explicit, but the intent was clear. They were planning this affair. I closed the laptop and went back upstairs. I lay in bed next to my wife, the woman I'd loved for 25 years, and felt nothing but coldness. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to think. What do you do when you know your wife is keeping secrets and playing dumb with you? What do you do when you lose trust in a woman you've trusted half your life? Hire a private investigator, which is what I did. The writer's workshop in Illinois was nearly 500 miles away, and I didn't know a soul there, so I asked a coworker who he'd resorted to when he caught his wife cheating. I used his recommendation, and he connected me with someone in Illinois. I contacted him. The man's name was Raymond Cross. The wonderful thing about the writer's workshop was that it was held on the campus of a state university. Raymond's operatives couldn't get into the program itself, though they could walk by the rooms all they wanted. But the workshop participants ate in the dining halls on campus, went to local bars, and lived in a large dormitory with other students. So no one noticed the odd student hanging around with nothing to do. Some of these students would work for me, and they would have high-tech gadgets. The school year was coming to an end. Our girls decided to stay at their universities for the summer to work in research labs with professors in their specialties. This meant that we would be left as empty nesters, and I had my work cut out for me. I took her out to dinner, cooked at home, and even took her to plays. She loved it all, and I was starting to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But whenever I told her I loved her, she would respond with a dismissive "I know." The pieces began to fall into place. She hadn't stopped loving me. She just took me for granted. I was known. I was safe. I was her security. She was sure she could go away, get a thrill, take a vacation from her marriage, and I would be here whenever she wanted. As a result, all my plans fell into place. The day she left, I decided I couldn't leave anything unsaid. We were standing at the door when her shuttle pulled up to take her to the airport. I hugged her, told her I loved her, and said, "Please don't do anything that will ruin us." She threw me an angry look and said, "I'm tired of you not trusting me. When I get back, We're going to have a long conversation about this. She then gave me a quick peck on the cheek, picked up her bags, turned, and walked to the shuttle. She left without even looking back at me. At that moment, I was sure my marriage was over. 25 years, 2 grown daughters, and my marriage ended with a whimper rather than an explosion. The private investigator did his job well. He told me later that they made it look easy. No one tried to cover up their behavior because no one knew them there. Vanessa must have taken her rings off on the airplane, because when she got to the workshop, they weren't on her finger. She told everyone that she'd recently gotten divorced, and my wife and Derek were immediately inseparable. They kissed, held hands, and acted like 2 high school sweethearts having their first crush. Raymond managed to place a small camera in the hallway of the dorm they lived in. Vanessa and Derek were assigned a room each, but they only used one. Sometimes they used hers, sometimes his, but they always spent the night together. I knew what went on in these shared dorm rooms, but Raymond and his team were very meticulous and left me in no doubt. One evening, 2 operatives who looked like ordinary college students sat down on the hallway floor with their backs to the wall and discreetly positioned a miniature camera. They captured what they needed to. I was done with that marriage. Everything else the team caught was just confirmation. Raymond continued to update me regularly, but after that first week, her fate was sealed and my mind was made up. From the first days of her seminar, I used my time to carry out my plan. I became a ghost in the wind. I was disappearing or getting as close to it as I could. When she returned, I would be gone. There would be no going back, no lies, no threats, no long conversations, no explanations, no excuses, no fixes. There would only be a divorce. My marriage was over. Love doesn't die quickly. But what is love without trust? A wife who cheats has no future. Some will say my decision was weak. They'll say she deserves punishment, humiliation, and hardship. But the law wouldn't allow me to do any of those things, and I wasn't going to ruin the rest of my life by trying to take revenge in that way on a cheating wife and her lover. My revenge would mean taking away the one thing she'd always counted on, the one constant that had always been there to support her, to comfort her, to cheer her on and encourage her. I was taking myself away. Derek wasn't a catch. He could never support her. Where would a 50-year-old divorced woman look for love, for emotional support? I didn't care. She would no longer be my problem. Every few days, Raymond sent me more photos, more videos, and more facts of betrayal by someone who had promised to forsake all others. The reports were hard to read. The photos and videos were even harder to look at. But the most painful part was listening to the audio files in which they talked about me. He texts me all the time about work stuff and how great things are at home. He thanks me almost every day, she said, laughing. That dumbass has no idea. Derek laughed. Well, better let him be. Treat him like a mushroom, and he'll stop annoying you. Now he can have his fishing trips, and I can have some fun. When you get home, how are you going to handle him? I'm going to turn it around on him. How dare he accuse me of anything? I'm a writer, damn it, and he's holding me back with his engineering talk and his boring life. What does he know about big ideas? She giggled. She actually giggled. At that moment, I began to truly hate. 25 years of building a life together, raising 2 kids, supporting each other, and listen to this. What happened to my wife? Where did she go? That woman wasn't the woman I married. She was some stranger who took on my wife's appearance. She was someone with no heart, no soul. Where was her love? Where was her compassion? Where the hell was her decency? Did she not remember the years we'd lived together and the life we'd created together? Did none of that really matter? No, obviously none of it mattered. She wanted her affair, and she was going to get it at any cost. After all, she was living the life of a writer, and she was due her greatness. There wasn't much I could do about it now, but I was determined that when it was over, she would have only her affair. I contemplated every conceivable form of revenge, up to and including public humiliation. I knew that none of those forms would bring me satisfaction. As long as my life was tied to her life, there was only one option left. I sat down with my boss and told him everything. He was very understanding. He'd gone through something similar himself a few years earlier, and he quickly arranged a transfer for me to the company's office in San Diego, California. I liked the idea. I knew some of the people in that office. They were professional, capable, and I liked them. I liked the city and the climate. I called the movers and arranged to ship half of the furniture and all of my personal belongings south. I prepared the car and got it ready for the trip. Then I sat down at the table with my attorney and started preparing the paperwork. Vanessa had her own insurance and retirement account, so I took her name off all of mine and listed my daughters as beneficiaries. I signed a quitclaim deed so she could have the house, but in exchange there would be no alimony. She'd get her car, but she'd have to buy her own insurance. I saved the bank accounts for the last few days and the credit cards for the very end. There was no need to tip her off. From that point on, all I could do was reinforce my resolve. What do I mean? I tried calling her to ask how the seminar was going and to tell her I loved her. I thought hearing her lie would help remind me that I was doing the right thing. She didn't let me down. She was full of enthusiasm, professed her love, and rushed off to dinner, all in less than 2 minutes. Raymond later told me that Derek had been sitting next to her the whole time, and they were exchanging smiles, rolling their eyes, and generally making disparaging comments about me. That helped a lot. It was all a joke to her, and I had no doubt that I was doing the right thing. From that point on, I sent her text messages instead of phone calls. I couldn't keep my composure over the phone. I was telling her about work and life at home, but what I was really doing was sending Jake and his wife on that fishing trip to Canada. They loved it. Jake had always been there for me. Before I left, I stopped by to say goodbye to both of them, and they promised to come visit me. As her 6 weeks came to an end, I completed the last of my preparations. A realtor friend gave me a for sale sign to hang in the front yard. I couldn't actually sell the house without her permission. I'd already deeded it to her, but she didn't know that. When she came home, this would be the first thing she'd see. I changed the locks on the house to make her feel like she didn't live there anymore. I printed out some photos from her trip, including images from the investigation, and made a copy of Raymond's report. I left it all on the dining room table so she'd know she was caught. The movers had already taken most of what I wanted and left it in storage until I was ready. I only took with me 2 suitcases, a briefcase, my laptop, and my guitar. The guitar had to be with me. I couldn't trust someone else with such an expensive item. I'd planned to leave the next morning, departing before she returned by late afternoon, so I'd be gone by the time she arrived. But the night before, I had a last-minute change of heart. I wanted the pain to start now, when all she had to do was wait and worry until she got home. I selected 3 photos and attached them to a text message with the words, "I'm divorcing you. I'm divorcing you. I'm divorcing you." I sent them to my soon-to-be ex-wife. I chose images that made the situation undeniable. Photos that showed her without her wedding ring, walking hand in hand with Derek, being intimate with him. I figured she'd see them and maybe it would ruin her last night with good old Derek while they frantically looked for cameras they hadn't noticed. Then I turned off my phone. With the announcement made, I carried the last suitcase to the car and carefully stowed the guitar in the passenger seat. After looking around the house one last time, I picked up my phone, took a quick picture of the empty rooms, and got behind the wheel. You probably thought I was driving one of those big diesel pickup trucks with all the extras. You think I started the engine and the noise rattled the neighbor's windows. Weren't you listening? I'm an engineer. I like technology. I drive a Tesla if I got paid more, so I drive a hybrid. I hit the start button, the dashboard came to life, and I heard nothing. It's a hybrid. I released the parking brake, put it in gear, and drove away from my house one last time, so quietly that no neighbor would know I was gone. I was a ghost on the wind, moving silently through the world, leaving betrayal behind me, leaving the house that had been our home for so many years. The home where we raised our daughters was simultaneously the most painful, the most uncertain, and the most liberating experience of my life. From a practical standpoint, my wife had died. I didn't know when or why, but she was dead to me as surely as if I'd lost her to illness. The woman who remained, who looked like my wife, was not someone I knew or wanted to know again. I was starting life anew with an unknown future. I was experiencing a profound sense of loss and, At the same time, a strange sense of liberation. The burden of lies, betrayal, and humiliation was lifted from my shoulders, if only temporarily. The only price I'd paid was that half of my life was now lost to me. It was getting late, but I was too worked up to stop, so I calmly drove 100 miles south on the interstate in the company of only my thoughts until I found a hotel for the night. That's how I found myself in Southern Oregon. I decided that after dropping the bomb on Vanessa, there was no reason for me to watch the results in real time, so I kept my phone turned off. I'd find out later if my message had made any difference to her. Either way, I was leaving my old life behind, and her reaction wasn't worth the bother. I got a room, grabbed a small bag and my guitar from the car, and fell asleep surprisingly quickly. I slept better that night than I had in months. When I got up, I took a long shower and went in search of a good, locally produced breakfast. I wasn't looking for a chain restaurant. I wanted a real diner. I needed something authentic. I found it and got what would likely be my last serving of real Northwestern-style hash browns for a while. That breakfast got me thinking, and I began to rethink my trip to San Diego. It was the first day of my revival, and I had a long drive ahead of me. I could have rushed to San Diego, running away from all my problems, but I had 2 weeks before I had to start work. Why rush? I needed time to calm down, come to terms with her betrayal, and put the past behind me. I decided to drive leisurely, enjoying the countryside as I traveled south and exploring each state and its people as I passed through. It was a week of transitioning from my old life to my new one. I was going to indulge my senses and cleanse myself of all that was ugly and wrong in my old life, preparing for a new beginning. Southern Oregon was the first real day of my new life, and that meant I set out in search of good wine country. I turned east and headed toward the Rogue Valley, taking scenic routes that led me into the heart of Oregon wine country. I found a lunch steeped in regional tradition before continuing south toward the California border. The drive through Northern California was stunning. Redwood forests towered above the highway, their ancient trunks disappearing into the mist. I pulled over at several viewpoints, just standing there, breathing in the clean air, feeling the dampness on my face. At this time of year, the coast is quiet and peaceful, not a harsh wind or commotion anywhere. Standing at one overlook, looking out over the Pacific Ocean, I began to hum softly to myself. The road stretched ahead, calling me toward something I couldn't yet name. I'd gone off the beaten path when I first left home. I'd never walked alone before, never chosen my own path without considering someone else first. Now I was walking past old memories, and I felt like a ghost. I spoke, but no one heard. My words fell silently over the edge of the earth. The stillness felt like death, and I began to think that being a ghost was not the solution I needed. It was a bad omen for my future, and for a while the loss of my former life consumed me. I spent the rest of the day driving through small coastal towns, watching the ocean crash against the rocky shore. The towns were full of artists and craftspeople, little galleries and shops. I stopped in one town and watched a street musician playing guitar in the plaza. Being surrounded by people and activity again cleansed me and lifted my spirits. For the first time since leaving home, I felt relaxed. The coast was full of small inns, and with a little effort, I managed to find a room despite having no reservations. It wasn't until I'd eaten a light dinner and settled in for the night that my thoughts finally returned to my failed marriage. She was home by now. I wondered what she'd think when she saw the for sale sign on the front lawn and her keys wouldn't unlock the door. The next day, I continued south through the dramatic coastline, past small towns and scenic overlooks. This was wine country, and I stopped for lunch at a vineyard restaurant. The food was excellent, the wine local and robust. As I drove through the back roads, past vineyards and farms, my thoughts returned to the house in Seattle, to the life I'd left behind, and I wondered why things had come to this. However, the point of this trip was to take my mind off those thoughts to some degree, so I tried to focus on the road and the countryside. The road and my thoughts seemed to merge into one. Ahead was a single ribbon of asphalt that led me toward my future. I would follow that winding ribbon as it led me away from betrayal and toward a new life. I arrived in the Santa Barbara area in time for a late lunch. The waterfront was beautiful, full of sailboats and yachts. I wandered along the harbor, looking at the boats, chatting with locals and passing sailors. I sat down at an outdoor restaurant and ordered fish tacos and a local beer. Can anything say more clearly California coast than that? I sat at a table near 4 people I didn't know, and we struck up a conversation. We became fast friends because coastal living attracts a certain type of person. Laid back, open, curious. We told each other our life stories, and by the end of the conversation, they knew about my impending divorce, and I knew about their own life adventures. At one point, as we talked about life and marriage, I saw myself through their eyes. I must have really looked like an odd duck. I'd left my wife, left my home, and was driving across states alone, taking my time. I told them that her lies and betrayal had caused me to pull away from her and our life together, and that sampling the experience of each place and meeting people along the way was my way of measuring off the miles and moving on, taking it to the next level and leaving the past behind. I had no intention of going back. My life as I knew it was over, and a new life had begun. They seemed to understand. They wished me well, and as we parted, I thanked them for their company. Sitting in my hotel room that evening, I finally picked up my cell phone and turned it on. No surprise, it was full of missed calls, emails, and text messages. Most of them were from Vanessa, and a few were from friends. I read and listened to them all. It was hard, but it had to be done. At first, Vanessa tried to tell me that all was not as it seemed. Of course it wasn't. These were messages she'd sent from Illinois before she got home, saw the evidence, and read Raymond's report. My friends told me that Vanessa was now calling everyone, trying to find me. She was looking in the wrong places. Jake and his wife knew where I was headed, but I'd purposely left the rest of them in the dark. I'd tell them as soon as I got settled. I already knew I couldn't play the ghost forever. The 2 calls that scared me were from my daughters. Vanessa was calling them, trying to find out where I was. I'd purposely not told them I was leaving their mother because I wanted to do it in person, but I couldn't let them worry. So I called the girls and calmly explained to them what was going on. They were upset and couldn't believe their mom could do such a thing. So I sent them the same photos I'd sent Vanessa the night I left home, as well as Raymond's report for them to read. After that, they vowed not to tell their mother where I was or what I was doing. There was another missed call. My attorney informed me that Vanessa had been served with divorce papers. Now she knew I was serious. He also informed me that Derek's wife had received a complete set of photos, videos, and audio recordings from his 6-week seminar. Take that, Derek. On the 3rd day after leaving home, I continued driving south. I took my time, stopping in small beach towns, walking along the shore, eating at local restaurants. I wasn't looking for anything special, but the landscape was so starkly different from Seattle that I had a very strong sense of being in a new place, both physically and emotionally. As I looked out over the Pacific Ocean from various viewpoints, I remembered thinking, was Vanessa's betrayal, which had punched a hole in my heart, nothing more than the first step to refueling my life? Would I be able to heal myself as my new life began? I spent the night in a small motel near San Clemente. After 3 days of driving with only my thoughts to keep me company, I began to ponder again the genesis of my failed marriage. It had failed not in those 6 weeks of betrayal in Illinois. It began to fail a year before that, when the last of our daughters moved out. It failed when she didn't want me to be a part of her writing life, when she stopped reading her work to me, and when she made me feel unwelcome when her writers group gathered at our house. It all went downhill when she started keeping secrets and making plans for 6 weeks without telling me. Was she looking for a fresh start? Did she need to feel some independence while enjoying the security of a devoted husband? Did she decide that, with the girls grown and out of the house, the marriage had served its purpose and it was time to start a new life? Did I become a liability to her, or just didn't matter anymore? We got married right out of college. I assume she went from her father's house to mine right away. Did she never really stand on her own 2 feet? God knows, her authority in our house was unquestioned. Was this my big mistake? Had I devalued myself by trying to provide her with the life she wanted? Or had she reached a point where living together had become too restrictive for her? I had more questions than answers, But the saddest truth was that I doubted I would ever get an honest answer from her if I asked. And if I asked and got the truth, what would it matter? I had so defined myself as her husband that the thought of cheating on her was unthinkable. And yet she had not only found it possible, but had mocked me to her lover. For a brief moment, I pictured their conversations, but these images were too painful to contemplate, and I pushed them out of my mind. It was these thoughts that rushed through my brain as I sank into sleep, and I slept poorly that night. On the fourth day, I reached the San Diego area. I wasn't in a mood to settle in just yet, so I kept my phone off because I wasn't in the mood to listen to my wife's excuses. I checked into a hotel near the coast and spent the afternoon walking on the beach, watching surfers ride the waves. As I sat in my room that evening, I had a weird moment of clarity when I realized that it was a good thing I wasn't getting divorced more often. I could have gained serious weight on this trip, eating my way down the coast. Regardless, the trip gave me what I needed. I had quiet time when I wanted to reflect on my life, and distractions and plans when I didn't. By taking the time to drive south, I was taking the time to put the past behind me and prepare to start my life anew. When I got up on day 5, I knew it was going to be a significant day. After eating a breakfast of eggs and toast and washing it down with good black coffee, I drove to the San Diego airport. I had a meeting scheduled with my daughters, who were flying down from Stanford and Seattle to meet me. The drive to the airport didn't take long, and in the late morning, I met them both. We agreed to put our serious conversation on hold so we could pretend to be happy for at least an hour or two. We went to lunch at a nice restaurant near La Jolla, and I listened to them tell me about their classes, their friends, their plans. They were exactly the young women I hoped they would be. Smart, confident, compassionate. As we were leaving the restaurant, I took them back to my hotel, and we sat in the lobby lounge and talked for hours. I showed them more evidence, played audio recordings I never thought I would ever share with my children. They alternated between sadness and rage. "I can't believe she did this," Olivia said. "Is this really the same woman who raised us? What kind of person has she become?" I had to stop her. "Olivia, no matter what she did, she's still your mother. Besides, it was me she betrayed, not you. I'm sorry to disagree with you, Dad, but she destroyed our family. She definitely did that to us." I couldn't argue with that. We talked until late afternoon, and I told them all my plans. They were upset but supportive. Sophia, always the pragmatic one, asked, "What do we tell her when she calls?" "Tell her I'm safe, that I'm starting over, and that I'll be in touch through my attorney. But don't tell her where I am." "Not yet." They both nodded. Olivia must have called Sophia before our meeting, because the younger one took the news better than her older sister. There was just as much frustration and anger in her, but much less surprise. She asked for proof, and I'd already shown it to her. Fortunately, their mother called during our conversation, and Sophia gave me the universal "No, I'm not here" sign. I shook my head, waved my arms, and made a cutting gesture across my throat. She nodded. Then Sophia did something I thought I'd never see. She answered the phone and said, "Dad's not here, Mom, but I need to ask you something. Is it true you cheated on him and lied about it?" I was at a loss for words. I wanted to tell her not to talk to her mother like that, but at the same time I had to agree with what she said. "You heard me, Mom. You spent 6 weeks being someone else's girlfriend while your husband stayed home alone. Was it worth it? Was it worth losing your marriage over?" After that, the conversation was short-lived. Sophia told me later that her mother mostly cried and tried to make excuses, but my daughter wasn't buying it. Later, I took them both to dinner at a nice seafood restaurant near the harbor. Like their mother had once been, my daughters had chosen their paths well, and the dinner was very enjoyable. As we were saying goodbye at the airport, Olivia said, "Dad, we love you. Come visit us when you're settled." "I will. I promise." Sophia added, "And Dad, we're proud of you for not staying in a bad situation. Mom made her choice. Now you get to make yours." I found a room for the night, and the next morning I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I was only hours from my new home now. I thought less about my soon-to-be ex-wife and more about my daughters. They were growing up to be strong, principled women, and I was very proud of them. I knew now that they would survive the impending divorce better than I had feared. This day was hard because I was starting a new chapter with no promise of when I would see them again. Turns out I shouldn't have worried. I wasn't ready to face the reality of starting a new life yet, so I took one more detour, driving up into the mountains east of San Diego. I spent a day hiking in the wilderness, breathing in the mountain air, feeling the sun on my face. As I stood on a ridge looking across the valleys and peaks, feeling the breeze that seemed so out of place in early August, I finally felt reborn. I stood alone, but at last I was standing. I had passed through the transition from my old life of pain and regret to a new life and all the possibilities it held. Now I stood on high ground, ready to begin life anew. Everything I could ever want lay before me. In the morning, I drove back down to San Diego proper. I arrived in the city in the middle of the afternoon and decided to meet with my new boss to let him know I'd arrived. I already knew about half of the office staff, and I was warmly welcomed. It was a pleasant experience. They were the first happy, relaxed faces I'd seen in a week. My new boss's name is Henry, and he gathered the entire office to greet me. I was quickly given a tour of the facility, but only after everyone had made a collective decision on where we would all go for dinner. I assumed it would be a restaurant downtown, but we ended up at Henry's house in Point Loma, where steaks were grilled with all the fixings. I know I should have tried fish tacos on my first real day in San Diego, but I had all the time in the world for that. It was about reintegrating into society, and I did that over amazingly tasty steaks and great local craft beer. They asked me to tell them about myself. What was a Northwestern guy doing, dropping everything and moving to San Diego at this stage of his life? So I told them. I left out all the graphic details but gave them enough information for them to understand. At the end, I said, I may be a little testy in the coming weeks. It's out of character for me, but I have a lot to work through. I hope that if I misbehave, you'll tell me and ask me to stop. I need a little pushback from time to time. I wasn't expecting it, but every woman there hugged me and kissed my cheek, and every man put his arm around my shoulders. We're here for you, Mark, Henry said. That was all they said and all they needed to say. The coast was full of small inns, and with a little effort, I managed to find a room despite having no reservations. It wasn't until I'd eaten a light dinner and settled in for the night that my thoughts finally returned to my failed marriage. She was home by now. I wondered what she'd think when she saw the for sale sign on the front lawn and her keys wouldn't unlock the door. The next day, I turned south and continued down Highway 1 through Big Sur. The road hugged the coastline, winding through some of the most breathtaking scenery I'd ever seen. Mountains plunged into the ocean, and the views were almost overwhelming in their beauty. This was the land of artists and dreamers, of people who'd left their old lives behind to create something new. As I drove through the winding roads, past dramatic cliffs and hidden beaches, my thoughts kept returning to the house in Seattle, to the life I'd left behind, and I wondered why things had come to this. However, the point of this trip was to take my mind off those thoughts, so I tried to focus on the road and the landscape. The road ahead was a single ribbon of asphalt that led me toward my future. I would follow that winding ribbon as it led me away from betrayal and toward a new life. I arrived in Monterey in time for a late lunch of fresh seafood and local wine. The town was charming, full of tourists and locals alike, and I spent the afternoon walking along Cannery Row, watching sea lions bask on the docks, and breathing in the salt air. I continued south through Carmel and into Big Sur proper, where I found a small lodge for the night. The next morning, I woke early and continued my journey, passing through San Luis Obispo and into Santa Barbara. Each town had its own character, its own story to tell, and I was beginning to feel like maybe I could write my own new chapter. By the time I reached the outskirts of Los Angeles, I'd been on the road for 5 days. I bypassed the city itself, taking the coastal route through Orange County and into San Diego County. The landscape changed as I drove south. Less dramatic than Big Sur, but beautiful in its own way with wide beaches and gentle hills. I arrived in San Diego on a Thursday afternoon, the sun bright and warm, the air filled with the scent of the ocean. I'd made it, my new home. I found a hotel downtown and checked in, exhausted but strangely content. That night, settled in my hotel room, I turned on my cell phone again. The screen lit up with dozens of messages. The girls had texted me with words of encouragement. They must have given my number to their friends, because I had at least 8 or 10 more messages from young men and women who appreciated everything I'd done for them over the years and wanted me to know they'd be there for my daughters. I loved those kids. A few friends kept getting in touch, so I decided to contact them all and tell them what was going on so they'd stop worrying. I didn't tell them where I was, that would come later. I only told them why I'd left. They didn't want to believe it, so I sent them the same 3 photos I'd sent Vanessa and told them I had much worse evidence if that didn't convince them. I thought about holding back, but I honestly didn't see any reason to protect her from her own decisions. I'd already tried and failed, so let the chips fall. Over time, I received messages of love and support from them all, and I promised to stay in touch. It quickly became clear to me that my plans to become a ghost were just a fantasy. Too many people cared about me, and that was a good thing. I read the remaining text messages from Vanessa and listened to the voicemails. She'd finally admitted what she'd done, but her confession was colored by strange bursts of anger. She somehow blamed me for what she'd done, for what I'd done, and for everything that had happened. Well, screw that. I texted her and told her I'd call her the next day at noon. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Let's just say it was an unsatisfying conversation. She alternated between accusations, blame, and denial. She was sorry. Derek's personality was overwhelming. I was suffocating her. It was my fault because I was working too hard. It was nothing serious, they were just fooling around. I almost burst out laughing when she told me she was just trying to find her muse. She even accused me of turning our daughters against her, as if her own actions hadn't led to this without any help from me. When she finally stopped talking, I laid it out plain and simple for her. She had conspired with Derek to cheat on me. She had resisted my attempts to keep us together. She had betrayed our vows, and now she was paying the price. I no longer cared why. When I hung up the phone, she was still crying and defending her righteousness. I was done with her. There was no going back. I knew too much. I found a simple but comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in an older building in the North Park neighborhood, within walking distance of good restaurants and coffee shops, and not too far from my new office in Sorrento Valley. I figured I could use the exercise and I thought it would be temporary, but my thoughts soon changed. I could live simply in the city, avoiding the extra work associated with a house, and rent a slip at the harbor for a boat. Then I thought, why not just buy a boat and keep it in the harbor? That could be my weekend retreat. By the time I'd thought all this through, it was early fall. I expected to live a lonely life, but it didn't really turn out that way. I see my daughters more often now than when I lived in Seattle. They come down at least one weekend every month, and they always bring a few friends with them. For 36 hours, my apartment turns into a busy hub of activity, and somehow I always manage to have them all over for dinner. By the time they leave, I desperately need some peace and quiet, though I miss them as soon as they walk out the door. I've also been surprised that a few of my old friends from Seattle have come to visit me, and the rest of them promise to come when they can. I live alone, but I'm not lonely. I have an increasing number of new friends, both from work and from my adventures around the city. The sailing community here is vibrant and welcoming, and I've met some interesting people in my wanderings. I've even met some interesting women, but I'm on my best behavior until the marriage is officially and legally dissolved. I still hear from Vanessa, even though the divorce will soon be final. She's never really repented and prefers to say I'm overreacting. All she says is, everyone does it. It doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. Intimacy means a lot, and lies and manipulation mean even more. I thought about explaining it to her, but people don't change, and I didn't see the point anymore. The truth is, I haven't been able to completely separate my life from hers. With 2 daughters and many mutual friends, I know that will never happen. However, with 800 miles between us, I no longer live with the daily rejection and betrayal. She was the most important person in my life until I was no longer hers. Now I have my own life and future to build. A few good things have come out of all this. First of all, I really like it here. I'm experiencing my first San Diego winter, and it's glorious. Sunny days and cool nights, perfect weather for sailing. The restaurants here are excellent, The craft breweries are outstanding, and the people are genuine. There's music of all kinds, beach volleyball if you're willing to learn, and surprises I'm still discovering. I think life is going to favor me after all. Is my heart healed? Not yet. But time heals, and I know a better life lies ahead. Oh, and Derek's wife apparently felt the same way I did. She kicked his worthless ass out of the house and divorced him. Better yet, both Vanessa and Derek remained unpublished. My wife cheated on me with a lowlife, a man who was married and had 2 children, yet cheated on his own wife when he went to be with mine. She tried to hide her cheating, but she couldn't hide her growing disrespect for me. My wife was a frustrated writer, and as our 2 girls left for college, her attention gradually shifted from our marriage to writing, and then to this other adventure. I spent 25 years devoted to her, our girls, and our life together. But once the girls left, I seemed to become unimportant to her. I think she began to see me as an obstacle to writing success, as if it was my fault that no publisher was interested in her work. I suppose every unsuccessful artist needs someone to blame, as long as the blame doesn't fall on themselves. But I think the truth has more to do with the fact that I was successful and happy in my career, and she never was. I don't know when the affair began, but I do know that within 6 weeks she was intimate with Derek. I know that nothing I tried could dissuade her from the betrayal, and that once it happened, I could never put it behind me. So I became the ghost of my marriage. While she was away enjoying fantasies of being a great, albeit aspiring, writer and spending her nights with Derek, I packed my things and set out for my new destination. I got a transfer from my company's office in Seattle to an office in San Diego, and spent a week driving down highways and back roads on my way to my new life. I sampled regional cuisine, talked to people, and took in the sights along the way. I thought that, with enough time and distractions, I could erase her memory from my mind. I was wrong. I also spent time with my beautiful and amazing daughters, who were in college at Stanford and the University of Washington, trying to explain to them what had happened and why I could never stay with their mother. They understood and supported me. I eventually made it to San Diego, where I met other engineers and technicians in my new office and rented a 2-bedroom apartment in North Park. Well, that should bring you up to speed regarding my life at that point. Eventually, things settled down. It didn't take me long to realize that I would enjoy living in San Diego. It was mid-August when I got settled, so it was still summer. There were several sailors in my office, and they quickly introduced me to other sailors in the area, so before long I was well into the sailing life. Any skipper is usually looking for a capable crew, and I quickly became familiar with sailing again. Sailing is like riding a bicycle. When you haven't done it for a long time, you can be a bit rusty at first, but it all comes back quickly. By September, I'd become a regular crew member on AJ24 yacht racing in San Diego Bay, and we were doing pretty well until the fall season ended and the yacht was put away for the season. Admittedly, I was buried in work, and I'm familiar with the admonition that all work and no play. But such is the life of a single man over 50 who lives alone. I'm not a big drinker, so I find bars somewhat tedious if I'm out alone. 1 or 2 nights a week, I'd meet up with someone from work or the sailing community and we'd have dinner and a beer or 2. Other nights, I cooked for myself, and on those nights I worked from home, both for something to do and to keep my mind occupied. I know that sounds boring, but I had a lot to think about while my lawyer was working on my divorce, and a man can think too much when it comes to things like that. Better to have something to occupy my thoughts. Vanessa called far more often than I would have liked, considering I wanted the calls to go away. Each call only reopened a wound that was slowly healing. She tried everything I expected and some things I didn't even imagine. She made promises, but what are promises when vows are broken? She threatened, but she had no more leverage over me. She said she missed me and loved me, and in some twisted way I think she did, but not enough to be faithful. She begged, but every time she did, I remembered those images of her with Derek, and my sympathy for her evaporated. She even threatened to come to San Diego and bring me back, but I convinced her that she wouldn't be warmly received. I didn't want to threaten her or treat her with hatred for what she'd done, but I would if it was necessary. Love dies slowly, even when trust is broken, but now I couldn't go back to her. It was summer, and I'd always heard about fall in Southern California, but until you experience it, you think it's just perpetual sunshine. It's farmers markets, outdoor concerts, and festivals, and I had a growing group of friends to share it with. I'm addicted to fish tacos and fresh craft beer, pleasantly warm days with cool evenings, and a palpable sense that something good is just around the corner. Winter in San Diego is definitely something mild. I tried to prepare for what locals called cold, but it was nothing compared to Seattle. I still had a lot to learn about this new place. All this time, and with every call, Vanessa was hiding some secret from me. When Derek's wife kicked him out of the house, he moved in with Vanessa. This little nugget of deception was told to me by my daughters, who I'd convinced to keep in contact with their mother. She wasn't much of a wife to me, but she was a good mother to the girls, and even at their age, girls need a mom sometimes. The girls learned about Derek from their grandmother. The first week I was gone, Vanessa called almost everyone we knew trying to find me. The only people she didn't call were my parents, her parents, and our siblings. I suppose that would have raised too many questions. Soon, probably through our mutual friends, word got out that I was missing, and her mother came to comfort her daughter. You can imagine her surprise when she discovered that a strange man was living with her daughter in the house that had shortly before been my home. As usual, Vanessa's explanation was less than truthful, and after 5 decades of knowing her daughter, my mother-in-law found Vanessa's lies transparent. Vanessa's mother told my daughters about it with some trepidation, and they patiently, if not tactfully, retold the story of the betrayal. As it turned out, their grandmother had called her daughter a word I'd never heard her use before, and for which her husband would have confronted me if I'd ever used it toward his daughter. Funny how quickly life can change. October passed, and Halloween was fast approaching. My girls came to visit me at least one weekend every month, but Halloween wasn't a school holiday, and they stayed at school. Still, I know they went to class in their costumes and sent me selfies for fun, but I wish I'd been there for them. There were young families all around me in my neighborhood, and the night I opened the door and greeted all those young trick-or-treaters, my spirits rose to their highest point since I'd left Seattle. Vanessa's calls were getting less frequent, but their tone didn't change. She fought the divorce. Eventually, my attorney threatened to release the most damaging and embarrassing evidence Raymond had gathered, and that's when Vanessa gave up. She stopped fighting the divorce and began negotiating to get as much of our assets as possible. Eventually, she had no more cards left to play, but it took months. As painful as betrayal can be, after 25 years of marriage, you greet the realization that it's about to end with genuine regret and a terrible sense of loss. It didn't make me change my mind, but like a death in the family, I grieved. My life went on and got better. Thanksgiving was approaching, and my daughters decided to spend it with me. As with every trip, they brought some friends with them. On this trip, it was mostly friends who couldn't make it home for the holiday, and since both daughters were there at the same time, we had a full house. Those who didn't sleep in the spare bedroom took sleeping bags and stretched out on the floor. It was a mixed group, so I just went to bed in my room and quietly reminded myself that they had every day on campus to do things I hoped they wouldn't do in my apartment. I tried to make a traditional Thanksgiving dinner, but the young women wouldn't let me do it. Dad will manage. Go enjoy the game. 2 smiling young women who were not my daughters took me by the shoulders, turned me around, and escorted me out. With those words, I departed, leaving the cooking in their capable hands. From time to time, I glanced into the kitchen, and what I saw could only be described as directed chaos. It was a joyous sight. Dinner was delicious and delightful, and I soon realized that my only job was to ask questions that encouraged everyone to tell me stories about school, their lives, and home. The conversation around the table was lively. I learned about the guys who disappointed them and the ones who didn't. Some of the conversation was in code, but I wasn't too old to understand. After dinner, I tried to organize a long walk in the cool November evening, but only a few joined me. The football game on TV was too exciting for the others. I enjoyed their company, and when we returned to the apartment, the young women told me a few more details about their friends, both past and present. It was then that Jenny, one of Sophia's friends, let something slip. "How is your relationship with Connor going?" "Who's Connor?" I asked in the almost sing-song tone that parents use to ferret out their daughter's secrets. You know how young people look when they're caught but still confident and cheerful? That was the look on every one of them except for my daughter, who was clearly doing calculations in her head. She still thought she could bluff. Oh, he's just a boy from school. Just a boy you get along with? I try to. Not like that. Dad. Yeah. God, she'd gotten caught. Okay, Connor is just someone I met in my digital circuits class last semester. He's a serious student, and I think you'll like him. Sophia says he's also a good dancer, Mr. Brennan. One of her friends added. That made them burst into giggles. Okay, so this Connor is a serious student, a good dancer, and you think I'll like him. So why haven't I met him? I was starting to feel like it was 6 of them against 1, and this time I wasn't on the side of 6. It's too soon, Dad. Besides, he had to go home to be with his family. And where is that? Okay, I was teasing her a little, but dads have certain responsibilities. Pennsylvania. And what are his parents like? Oh, they're really nice. And then the look of shock on her face told me she realized she hadn't just gotten caught once. So you've met them? Yes. And they're nice. But it's too soon? I'll work on it. I knew at this point that her friends would handle it much better than I would, so I left the subject for now. I had a good opinion of my daughter's friends, and they seemed to like this young man. Plus, I knew both my daughters had good heads on their shoulders, so I was sure I shouldn't worry too much. The vacation passed, and my traveling band of young people headed back to their schools, leaving my batteries charged and my heart full. Life continued to seem better and better. I would need every bit of that joy and the full support of my daughters for what lay ahead. Before my girls left for school after Thanksgiving, we had a long discussion about what to do about Christmas vacation. Vanessa was already furious that Olivia and Sophia had come to San Diego for Thanksgiving instead of traveling to Seattle to be with her. Forget the fact that San Diego was a few hours away and Seattle was a full day's travel. It was all about Vanessa. We decided that I would buy the tickets and we would all fly back to Seattle for Christmas. I'd stay with my parents, who were in their 70s, and there's no telling how many more years we'd have together. My girls would stay wherever they saw fit. They decided to stay with their mother and visit friends and both sets of grandparents whenever possible. For my part, I agreed to reconcile with my soon-to-be ex-wife and socialize with her parents, who had always liked me. Can I say it was a trip to hell and back? No, I don't think that's enough. The family decided that each of the grandparents would have their own Christmas Eve. I'd be with my family, the girls would spend time with both sets of grandparents, and toward the evening, I'd visit my former in-laws. I agreed to spend Christmas morning with Vanessa and the girls and then talk to her privately before I left. It felt more like a diplomatic mission than a holiday, but it all needed to be done. I needed to figure out my relationship with Vanessa and determine what kind of relationship I might have with her family in the future. There was no getting away from it. Vanessa and I had daughters in common, and someday we would have sons-in-law and grandchildren. Our paths would cross year after year, and I was determined not to ruin any family holidays with a fight with my soon-to-be ex. My daughters and I flew to Seattle separately and arrived late in the morning 2 days before Christmas, each flying out of airports close to school or home. I rented 2 cars, one for me and one for the girls. They were staying longer than I was, and I figured they'd want independence to see their friends and might need to get away from their mother's drama at some point. Before leaving the airport, we sat down at a cafe and clarified our plans. Just a few minutes of chatting with these 2 sweet and energetic young women put my thoughts in order. I immediately decided that I was going to enjoy the vacation as best I could and not let Vanessa ruin it for any of us. After signing the rental papers, loading the suitcases, and getting one last round of hugs, I quietly watched these 2 sweet and very mature young women drive away. I know they have a lot of independence at school, but there's nothing like a car to make a young person feel completely independent and free. Watching them drive away, I felt that they would enjoy these days no matter what else happened. I made it to my parents' house and settled in for a quiet conversation. They were interested in my new life in San Diego, made a few teasing remarks about Californians, and I assured them I'd survived my first San Diego winter. Dad is a retired engineer, so we chatted about work for a while. Mom wondered if I was eating right. What can I say? Once you become a kid in your mom's house, you're a kid for life. I guess that's how she shows her love. Eventually, we got to the elephant in the room, so we had a long and very painful conversation. Vanessa's parents. Apparently her mother met the man she's now living with. I assume you know something about that. Yes, Mom. It's Derek, the man she cheated with. Well, Betty didn't like him at all. She said he gave her the creeps when he tried to be charming and sweet. She said he looked like a man who would steal her purse if he had the chance. Well, he stole my wife, so the purse doesn't seem like such a big deal. You know, your dad and I were really worried about you that first week you were gone. We had no idea where you were or if you were even alive. Please don't do that to us again, son. I won't, Dad. I'm sorry for what I did. I wanted to disappear so Vanessa would never find me, and I'm afraid I took the all-or-nothing approach. It was crazy. I should have known I couldn't disappear for real, and I didn't want you to worry. I promise I'll never do that again. I assume you're done with her? There's no going back. Never. I'm done. I know I didn't give you enough detail about what happened, but I found out that she might be planning to cheat on me about a month and a half before she left for that writing seminar in Illinois. I still don't know if she cheated on me before that, but for the 6 weeks she spent at the seminar, she was with Derek and acted like they were newlyweds. I tried everything I could to keep her from going or to let me go with her, but I couldn't stop her. I was never sure if she would cheat until she did, but in the last 6 weeks before the seminar, I had a bad feeling about it. I even begged her not to do anything that could ruin our marriage, but she only got angry at me for my suspicions. Once she did that, the marriage was over as far as I was concerned, even if I could forgive her. And in all this time, she has never once apologized to me. I don't know how I could ever trust her again. I'm sorry, Dad, but the marriage is over. My father took a pause to gather his thoughts. Okay, I'll say this in front of your mother so she can't accuse me of saying it behind her back. If I were in your shoes, I'd do the same thing. You old goat. If I were in his shoes, I'd do it faster and cut your balls off in the process. Mom has a way with words. Dad looked at Mom and smiled. It's nice to feel wanted. Mom just hummed and patted Dad on the knee. Are you going to see her on this trip? I don't think I can avoid it. Maybe we can clear the air and start building a new relationship so I don't have to be a burden to the girls. I promised to spend Christmas morning with Olivia and Sophia, and after the girls go off to see their friends, I'll talk to Vanessa. Maybe she'll realize that we both need to be allowed to move on with our lives. Geez, is that it? Merry Christmas. I think Dad realized what kind of Christmas celebration awaited me. I promised to see her family on Christmas Eve, after we have dinner. The girls have promised to have dinner with us first and then go there with me, so it won't be too stressful. I wouldn't worry about it being bad. Vanessa's mother is still furious about her behavior. As soon as she found out what Vanessa did, she practically disowned her. Now she thinks you're some kind of saint for being so forgiving. Forgiving? I ran away before she got home and moved 800 miles away to be away from her. Mark, you left her the house, and with her teacher's salary, it's the only home she'll ever have. That shows how smart I am, Dad. I left her the house, and just as fast, she moved Derek in there. I heard that Derek's wife is divorcing him. Mom, how are you hearing all this? I'm a good listener, and Vanessa's mom likes to talk. Right now, her favorite topic of conversation is how her daughter traded away and lost a good man. I've always liked Betty. So it's true. What's true? That I gave Derek's wife everything I had on their affair. You bet it's true. Mom only shook her head as if disapproving, but a sly smile gave away her true feelings. Dad laughed outright. The day went better from there. I helped them do a few chores around the house that they'd been putting off, and we put up the last of the decorations. I told them about my life and new friends in San Diego while they filled me in on everything I'd missed since leaving Seattle. Then I helped with dinner. It was a very enjoyable afternoon and evening. In the morning, I helped clean the house for the guests, set the dining room table, and prepare the food. Christmas Eve dinner was set for 2 o'clock, and by the time the food was ready, the house was filled with everyone I hadn't seen in many months. My brother and sister arrived with food, family, and kisses, and a few cousins and friends dropped by unannounced just to say hello. Of course, everyone wanted to spend time with my daughters, who were enjoying the attention. Friends and family asked me quiet questions about the divorce and how I was coping. By dinner time, the distant relatives had mostly dispersed, and after dinner we exchanged gifts. The grandchildren, as they do every year in my family, made out well. My siblings and I exchanged gifts and laid out a pile of carefully wrapped presents in front of my parents. They said, as usual, "Oh, you shouldn't have. This is too much. I don't know where to begin." When it was over, they said, "You really went overboard this year." They probably would have said the same thing if we'd only gotten them a bag of socks. My parents are consistent that way. In the early evening, it was finally time to meet my in-laws. This was something I wasn't looking forward to, despite the words of encouragement I'd received from family members. I suppose by this time I'd built up a mountain of regrets, not about leaving, but about how I'd left. Disappearing like that with no explanation and then dropping those photos on everyone to explain my decision. It wasn't the right way to go about it. I owed more to these people and it was time to make things right. The three of us walked up to the house, and no sooner had I rung the bell than the door opened. My father-in-law was a good man, and no one in his family doubted his love, but he'd never been demonstrative with the men in the family. After hugging his granddaughters, he walked around them both and hugged me. It was the first time since we'd met that he'd done something like that. In a quiet voice, almost too quiet to be heard, he said, "We're sorry, Mark. We thought we raised her better than that. Please forgive us." With that one gesture, a terrible weight was lifted off my shoulders. "I'm sorry too, Jim. I should have explained things to you myself. I shouldn't have just taken off like that. Believe me, Mark, no one blames you. Vanessa hasn't been forthright with us, but we know what's happened." My soon-to-be ex-father-in-law escorted us into the house, where my mother-in-law hugged each of us and burst into tears. She was both happy to see us and saddened by the circumstances. I'd always liked and admired her. She gave her whole heart to her family and was vulnerable as a result. I kissed her on the cheek and thanked her for the invitation. "Of course, Mark. You are still family and always will be." She buried her face in my chest for a moment, and I felt her shudder, crying quietly. All I could do was hug her and assure her that I would love her and her husband forever for all the love and support they'd given me. I was stunned. I was divorcing their daughter, and all they could do was tell me they loved me. From that point on, everyone welcomed me as family, kissed my daughters, and did everything they could to make me feel welcome. Vanessa seemed to step back as her family embraced me. I guess things weren't going exactly as she'd planned. We spent several hours talking about our lives. The girls told everyone about college, and I told everyone about San Diego. Nothing was said about why I was now living down south, and it seemed like Vanessa was getting more and more worried as her family took in the stories about my new life. Everyone had already eaten, but I was offered a beer and a plate of leftovers. I gladly accepted the beer and declined the plate. The girls received gifts from their grandparents and loved everything they got. The grandparents raved about them like they were long-lost relatives who'd finally come home. I kept laughing to myself and thinking, they've only been away at school. I had a gift for both Jim and Ann. I felt I owed them a debt of gratitude, and they in turn gave me the heaviest sweater I'd ever seen. "We thought you might need it up north. Down south." Down south? I could wear this to Alaska and not freeze. But I thanked them profusely. As I left, I took a moment to approach Vanessa and remind her that I'd see her in the morning. It wasn't so much a promise of reconciliation as a gesture meant to ease tensions. At that moment, I couldn't understand her, and I didn't know what she was thinking. In the evening, I returned to my parents' house, and we discussed what had happened. "I told you they don't hold you responsible, Mark. They've got it all figured out." "I know. Still, I expected them to try to convince me to take her back. But they never did." We spent the evening talking, and over a glass or two of sherry. My mother doesn't like hard alcohol, but a glass of sherry on a cold night seems to make everything right. We relaxed into the holiday spirit. Christmas morning found me at my old house, opening presents with Vanessa and my girls. It was Christmas, and we were still a family, at least for a while. We'd been a family for 25 years, and old habits are hard to break. I bought various gifts for my daughters and then gave Vanessa and the girls each a pair of matching opal earrings. I thought perhaps we should celebrate the family bond at Christmas this year, and the girls liked the idea of getting earrings like their mothers. We had breakfast, and after the appropriate amount of time, the girls left to see their friends, and I was left alone with Vanessa. We settled down in the living room, and she began her story. You know, I never meant for this to happen, Mark. I just got caught up in the excitement about the seminar and being back in that college environment. You planned this months in advance, Vanessa. I overheard your conversations with Derek. You even sent me away to Canada to get me out of the way. At this, she got angry. Those tickets cost me a lot of money, Mark, and you just gave them away. It was a bribe, Vanessa. A distraction so I wouldn't find out what you were up to. I still can't believe you hired a private investigator. I would have told you if you'd only asked. There were never any secrets between us, Mark. What nonsense. I told you I knew what your plans were, and I begged you not to do anything that would ruin our marriage. You denied everything and lied to my face. You're putting too much importance on that, Mark. After 25 years, I deserved some time to myself. And if you'd been more understanding, we wouldn't be divorced right now. You stayed with Derek, slept with him, and spent your nights with him. Night after night. That was only 6 weeks. After 25 years, why can't you get over it? It doesn't have to be the end of us. I'm sorry, Vanessa, but it is. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, or maybe you and Derek are just more worldly and sophisticated than I am, but I don't share. Those vows we made meant a lot to me. But when I saw you cheating, I just didn't have anything to hold on to. It's your fragile male ego. I've always been there for you. I've never left your side. You just can't accept that I wanted a little more. Maybe. I don't know if my ego is fragile, but I know my self-esteem is strong enough to deserve more than a part-time wife in my marriage. If you come back, I'm done with Derek. Tell me something, Vanessa. If we go upstairs now, will I find his clothes in my old closet? No. Were they hanging there last week? She didn't answer. Vanessa, I know Derek moved in with you after I left. I think you're hedging your bets. Maybe you'll be done with Derek if I come home. Maybe not. But you'll keep Derek around while I'm not here. That's true, isn't it? He's only here because you've gone away. You're out there living the bachelor life. Do you think I should be living like a nun? Actually, Vanessa, I live like a faithful married man away from home. There are no other women. I don't go on dates. I'm just trying to build a new life in a new place with new friends. I work hard, and sometimes I have a beer or dinner with coworkers. That's my life, and I've gotten back into sailing. Remember how I sailed before the girls came along? Well, I started working on boats before it got cold. We did Wednesday night races and weekend regattas, and we were doing pretty well. I've started looking at getting my own boat, and I'm enjoying it. I'm trying to talk to you about our marriage, and you're talking about boats. You've always been a selfish bastard. I sat there for a minute, looking at her and waiting. No apology followed. Vanessa never took anything back, ever, and this time was no exception. Okay, Vanessa, I think it's time for me to leave. I'm flying home tomorrow. I have my new life in San Diego, and you have Derek. I hope you realize this was a good deal for you. I really hope so. With those words, I took my coat and walked out of the house that had been mine, that had been ours for so many years. It was the house where we built our marriage and raised our girls, but it was no longer my home. I would come back here for family holidays, but I would always be a guest. And for the first time, I was at peace with my decision. I was truly ready to move on. I spent the rest of the day with my parents, saw the girls when they stopped by to show off their new earrings to their grandparents, and flew home the next day. Sitting on the plane, I went over the events of the last few days in my mind. I thought about how proud I was of my daughters and offered a prayer of thanks that Vanessa's family seemed to understand my decision. If I'd fought with them, it would only make my daughters' lives more difficult. My only problem now was finalizing the divorce, and then I could socialize with Vanessa on the rare occasions I'd see her again. I'd left Seattle 5 months before, intending to become a ghost, to disappear and stay out of sight. But I was returning to San Diego a whole person again, with a family, daughters, and a life that had great potential. The pain was gone, and Vanessa's betrayal no longer defined me. I was ready to live again. In the years that followed, I told friends and family, I couldn't help it. I just fell in love with her. So many years have passed, and she still laughs at that corny joke. We landed in San Diego, and I was standing at the baggage carousel, impatiently waiting for my suitcase. When it finally appeared, I quickly grabbed the handle and hurried toward the exit. All I wanted to do was get home and put this whole trip behind me. I turned around, took a half step, tripped over my own feet, and fell face first to the ground. I have to tell you, a fall like that when you're a student can be brushed off, but when you're a little over 50, it's a different matter. After gathering my courage and dealing with my embarrassment, I rolled onto my back, propped myself up on my elbows, and tried to catch my breath. I was in pain and a little disoriented. Then this face with brown hair and a few streaks of gray leaned over me and asked, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think I'm fine." In fact, I suddenly felt much better than okay. Who was that angel with the concerned look on her face? I didn't realize it right away, but she knelt down beside me, put her hand on my chest, and spoke to me in the most soothing voice, even though it was clear to anyone that she was, at least for a moment, worried. "I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. Did you hurt yourself?" After asking this, she placed her other hand on my forehead and then ran it gently over my head, checking for injuries. Is there any man in the world who doesn't react to a woman making such a fuss over him? She knelt down on that airport floor, and the only thing she cared about was making sure I was okay. I thanked her, assured her I'd be fine, paused for a moment to gaze into her face, and then, smiling, began to pick myself up off the floor, trying to stand. "Are you sure? Maybe you should just lie there for a minute." I thought about it, but I was getting better by the second. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. As I got to my feet and brushed my pants off, I realized that the reason I'd fallen was because in my hurry to get home, I tripped over her roller bag. Like I said, I couldn't help myself. I just fell in love right then and there. She apologized, and by this time I was smiling. "I'll be fine. It's my fault for not watching where I was going." "Oh, I'm so embarrassed about this. Is there anything I can do to help?" Be honest, when a beautiful woman says something like that, what are you going to do? I paused, weighed my options, and said, "Well, if you have a few minutes, you might agree to have a cup of coffee with me. There's a coffee shop over there, and I probably shouldn't be driving so soon after my fall." Okay, I went a little overboard, but she smiled when I said that. I guess a cup of coffee wouldn't hurt. My mother didn't raise a fool, so I smiled and made a gesture as if to say, "You lead, and I'll follow." I wish I'd been more graceful, but I actually had to run my fingers through my hair first, gather my bag, then my briefcase, and straighten my jacket. But I was as quick as I could be and soon followed her toward the coffee shop. As she walked ahead of me, she looked back, and I saw a brief smile with a hint of shy embarrassment. The airport coffee shop didn't have table service, so I asked how she was feeling, walked over to the counter, and soon brought her what might have been the fanciest coffee in a paper cup that $5 could buy. Her name was Lauren, and still is. At that first coffee shop table, we got to talking about what had brought us to the same airport on the same day. She was returning from visiting her daughter Harper, who had moved south about 3 years ago with her husband Ethan, who'd gotten a good job in my old home state of Washington. And of course, I told her a brief and very streamlined version of my recent departure and return for the holidays. "Oh, Mark, that's awful. I wish I could say I don't understand, but I understand it all perfectly. My husband was a terrible cheater. I caught him at least 3 times during our marriage." "Why did you stay with him?" "I stayed because of the children. They were little and they needed a father, no matter what kind of father he was. I stayed until the youngest went off to college, and then I divorced him. It's hard to break those bonds, isn't it? Even after betrayal and pain, it's hard to leave. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but I knew he'd never stop. He couldn't. I don't know what was wrong with him, but eventually I realized that his cheating wasn't because of me. There's something missing in him, and he needs to chase women to fill that void. For him, it's like eating peanuts. He gets what he needs, and then eventually he needs another peanut. He'll do it until the day he dies." There was sadness in her eyes. I was drawn to those brown eyes. There were noticeable crow's feet around them, a sure sign of a mind enriched by books and a heart touched by sadness. Her skin had several fine lines that appeared after decades of exposure to sun, wind, and coastal weather. There was no mistaking that this woman had lived her life fully, mostly outdoors. Sometimes I feel like I've been both mother and father to my children for over 2 decades. I was a wife and mother, but my husband would disappear even when he was around, so I did a lot of things on my own. I took my kids camping, taught them how to swim and surf. I think those lessons will stay with them, and I get a certain joy out of that. You can't spend all your time indoors. Don't I know it? I tried raising my 2 girls to be active, but my wife was never thrilled about it. I even sold my sailboat when the girls were little because I had to choose where to spend my time, on the water or with them. Shame on you, Mark. Lauren grinned. You let your wife get away with too much. I had to admit her gentle scolding stung a little, but she had a point. I think I've gotten a second chance with the girls. I see them more often now than when I lived in Seattle, and I've started looking for a boat. I might be able to help you with that. I know the sailing community here, and I've heard of some nice boats for sale. I might be able to help you find something. Do you know what you want? Well, when I was young, I used to race, but that kind of thing doubles or triples the cost of sailing. I'm thinking of something around 30 feet long, with enough freeboard so the waves hit the sides instead of the deck. I want to sail it out of San Diego Bay, so it needs to handle the offshore swell without making the crew wet. I want it dry enough so I don't have to put on foul weather gear just because the wind picks up, but I don't want it sluggish. You know what I mean? Are you planning on doing any overnight trips? Sure, a few, but I don't need full standing headroom below. I don't need all that wind resistance from high cabins. I like to be able to see where I'm going and dodge the kelp beds. That made her laugh a little. I want a boat that handles well and is reasonably responsive, but nothing crazy. Sounds like you're still into racing. Well, maybe a little, I smiled. I hear there are classic yacht races here. Yes, we have classic yacht races here, she laughed. It's a good sign when you can make a beautiful woman laugh. We talked for far longer than anyone would want to spend in an airport cafe, and I took every opportunity one could to appear attentive, taking in her face, her smile, and that little bashful look when she caught me staring at her for too long. Eventually, I realized it was time. I suppose you have to go, but is there any chance we could see each other again? I think it's possible. What do you mean? I've been gone for almost a week, so I don't know what's going on this weekend. How about dinner and maybe a movie? She only smiled, pulled a piece of paper out of her purse, and wrote down her address and phone number. Call me Friday night, and we can plan everything. Yes, ma'am. I'm still fairly new here, so if you have a favorite place, be sure to tell me. She was smiling genuinely now. I can, or I can just see what you come up with. It was already late Wednesday, so I had a few days to come up with something good. Back at the apartment, I researched restaurants and entertainment options and got lucky. The Observatory North Park had a concert scheduled for Saturday night by one of my favorite folk musicians. I quickly called and bought the last 2 tickets. Now all I needed was somewhere to eat dinner. I made a reservation at a nice seafood place in Little Italy. Not too pretentious, but with a nice atmosphere. I left a backup reservation at a Mexican restaurant in case she didn't like seafood. Then I went out and bought a new shirt, a pair of pants that didn't have permanent creases in them yet, and a jacket that was actually in style for once. That's how it all started. Over dinner that Saturday night, she told me what she'd learned about the ways of a cheating spouse, and I filled in the blanks I'd left in my own story. For a while, our dinner was in danger of being consumed by grief and anger, until I said, "We can't do this." "What do you mean?" "I mean that we can't let them poison our evening. What do you say we let the ghosts haunt someone else for the rest of the night?" She smiled. "Deal. So tell me about your daughters." "Well, that's all a proud father needs." I told her about my daughters, all their friends, and how they come to visit at least one weekend every month. She made me promise to take her out to breakfast the next time they came to visit, and you can bet I wasn't going to forget that request. She then told me about her daughter and son. I didn't immediately realize that we both have children who are just as wonderful, and we can be proud that we raised them right. The music that evening was delightful, warm, and intimate. You don't go to a folk concert unless you're ready to sing along to a few songs, and that night we both mustered up the courage to try. I failed miserably. She laughed, and I sang again. Her laughter made me feel invincible. When I drove her home, she invited me in for coffee. Coffee was a code word for coffee. We sat and talked, drinking coffee and talking some more. When the conversation died down and I thought it was time for me to leave, I said, "Lauren, I'd really like to see you again. Is that possible?" "Yes, Mark. Very possible." She smiled and paused to stare intently into her mug. "But I need to say something. I can't. Don't want to get involved with a married man. I understand. My divorce is due to be finalized in March, and I'm not going to change my mind about it. How about we limit it to friendship for now? I love being with you, Mark, but I don't want to feel guilty looking in the mirror. Believe me, I understand. I think I'd be more comfortable that way too." Now it was my turn to stare intently into my mug. "But I have to be honest with you, Lauren. I'd like to see my new friend more often, if she's willing." She was smiling broadly now. "I think she's more than willing." I received a very chaste kiss on the cheek as I left her that evening. I got another when I picked her up for dinner the following Wednesday night, and another when I drove her home. For a guy who'd been married for a very long time, I was living large. Our life continued in this way for 10 weeks. We started seeing each other twice a week, then moved to 3 times, and on our free evenings we often called each other on the phone. On weekends when weather permitted, she would direct me to explore San Diego, taking back roads to small coastal towns, both along the coast and inland. She had a knack for finding quaint stores in small beach communities, and we explored them as part of our adventure. She showed me marinas, local artisan shops, and small out-of-the-way restaurants. When we didn't go anywhere, we cooked together. I was having a great time, though I admit a quiet voice in the back of my mind was saying, "Be careful. Take your time. Look before you leap." I hate that voice. She met my daughters when they came to visit, and they started asking if Lauren would be with us the next time they came. I remember saying, "You don't like Lauren? What's the problem? We love Lauren. If she can't make it, we can come another weekend." At that, I calmed down. At the same time, I met her son and daughter. There was no doubt that they were cut from the same cloth as my own daughters. When we introduced the 4 of them, plus one husband, we were forever outnumbered. Lauren told me that she'd had a heart-to-heart talk with her children about us just being friends. She said they didn't buy it, and as the weeks went by, neither did I. I talked to my girls about the same thing, and they just smirked. "I'm being serious. Lauren and I agreed that as long as I was married to your mother, we would play by the rules. I won't do anything to break my vows, at least not until they're dissolved." "We know, Dad. And if Mom hadn't been foolish, you'd still be a faithful husband. But she was. You deserve to be happy, Daddy, and Lauren will make you happy. Besides, we like her." "Yeah, Mom doesn't like her, but we do. What does your mom know about Lauren?" They looked at each other, confused. "I'm sorry, Dad. Don't be mad. But we kind of told her about Lauren." You'd think I was relieved to hear that, but that wasn't the case. The months I'd spent from August until Christmas, and then the weeks since I'd met Lauren, had taken their toll on me. I had come to terms with Vanessa's betrayal and moved on, and I was happy. 7 months ago, I would have celebrated Vanessa's misery and fueled her jealousy. I would have rubbed her nose in it. But I wasn't like that now. There was no point in pouring salt on her wounds. Her life was her punishment. Lauren and I continued to explore our developing friendship. We spent many evenings together, but at night we slept alone in our own beds. One evening in late March, my life changed again. When I came home from work and read the mail, there in a manila envelope from my attorney's office was the final judgment of my divorce from Vanessa. I had seen the end of my marriage with my own eyes when I viewed the evidence from Illinois in late June. I now had legal confirmation of my freedom. No matter how much I thought I was ready for it, no matter how hard I'd worked for it, when it happens, the realization hits you hard. 25 years of marriage and a life devoted to one woman doesn't make it easy to prepare for starting over. I sat on the couch for probably an hour or more, reflecting on the past. When I was ready, I called Lauren. "Do you need some company? I can come over." I think I need to be alone tonight. I think I need to grieve for a while. Does that make sense? That makes sense. I'll let you be. Call me when you're ready. And if I don't hear from you in a few days, I'll call your landlord to fumigate the apartment. God help me, this woman makes me smile. I don't think it will come to that. Okay, Mark. Don't forget about me. How can I forget you? It was just one night. I sat around, felt sorry for myself, drank a few beers and went to bed. In the morning, I felt significantly better. I called my daughters, told them the news, and then called Lauren and asked if she would go to dinner with me. You're in luck. I'm free tonight. How about tomorrow night? That was my attempt at flirting. After 25 years of marriage, a man loses his flirting skills and risks appearing desperate. You're lucky again. I happen to be free both nights. Well, how about we have dinner tonight and drinks overlooking the bay, and then we'll decide what to do tomorrow. We had a lovely evening. As I walked Lauren to her door, hoping for our usual, albeit chaste, kiss on the cheek, I started to say goodnight. I saw tears in her eyes. I said I wouldn't get involved with a married man. I never said anything about a divorced man. After another kiss, a real one this time, she said, and now we officially leave the friendship phase and start the dating phase, if that's okay with you. With those words, she ran her hand over my cheek, turned around, and walked into her house. She smiled one last time and closed the door. I froze for a moment, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I thought I had the green light and then it was gone. After a moment of fleeting frustration, I reminded myself that Lauren is a serious woman. She's not going to rush into anything on her first free day. The friendship had been solid, and now the courtship was beginning. Realizing this, I left her porch a happy man and smiled all the way home. The next evening, it was exactly the same. After that, I was invited back into the house. Now, however, whenever we were together, whether it was a walk around the neighborhood or cooking together, there was a completely different atmosphere in the house. There was an electricity in the air that had always been present but always suppressed. Now it was no longer suppressed. There were knowing smiles, loving tones, and gentle touches. No matter how we spent the evening, it ended on the couch with conversation and closeness. Of course, I had known for 3 months that I had a girlfriend. My daughters knew, her kids knew, my friends at work knew. Hell, even my parents and ex-wife knew. But now she was showing me that she felt the same way. We grew closer each day as we continued to eat dinner, explore the area, and find whatever adventures we could. It was early May, and spring was in full bloom. The days were warm and the nights were cool. Perfect weather. Lauren called me at work around noon on Friday and asked if I wanted to come over for dinner that night. Of course, I said yes. Then she practically knocked me off my chair by saying, "Pack a small bag. I'm going to make breakfast, and then we can look at the boat I found for you." She said it so casually that I almost let it pass. When I realized what she'd said, I was at a loss for a moment. A bag? Yes, unless you want to wear your work clothes to the marina. I left work early and rushed to my apartment to shower. Then I showered again. I packed some clothes, but I put them in my duffel bag. I didn't want to seem like some weirdo who brought a suitcase to his girlfriend's house. So I packed for 3 days. I was ready to stay until Monday morning. Hell, I'd take a day off work and spend the whole week there if I could talk her into it. I pulled up to her house, got out of the car. My pulse was racing and my mouth was dry. Don't think about it too much. Calm down. Don't be embarrassed. You've both been working toward this since Christmas. Just relax, and it'll work out. I worried alternately between being too nervous and being overeager. 25 years of marriage, and it felt like the first time all over again. Then I thought, maybe I'm sleeping in the guest room. She didn't specifically say, "Okay, I can do that." Don't expect too much. Everything takes time. That thought brought me both relief and disappointment at the same time. I thought about leaving my bag in the car in case I was misunderstanding. But screw it. She met me at the door. I set my bag down, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of confusion or disappointment on her face. "You said to pack a bag." "I just thought." Lauren smiled. I seemed to amuse her easily. "I hope they didn't get wrinkled." Taking my hand, Lauren led me into the kitchen. I was thinking lasagna and a salad on the side. Does that sound good? Everything sounds good. So we got into a routine we'd been building for months. We cooked together and drank wine while the lasagna baked. We ate and talked, and she flirted with me in a way she'd never flirted with me before. I was on cloud nine. I didn't eat much that night. My stomach was too nervous for food. We'd suppressed our desires for so many months that now I wasn't sure of her intentions. Could this really be the night? I was helping clear the table when I noticed her hands were shaking. Lauren, are you okay? You're shaking like a leaf. She laughed softly and looked at the floor, shaking her head. Mark, I've only been with one man in my life. I'm nervous. And I thought I was the only one nervous today. Now we were laughing together. Did I misunderstand the invitation? No, Mark. I'm ready now. With those words, she took my hand and led me to her bedroom. After all the days and evenings I'd spent at her house, this was the first time I'd been in her bedroom. It was beautiful, warm, and inviting, just like Lauren. The night was everything I'd hoped for and more. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. I made my way to the kitchen, and there waiting for me was Lauren's son Julian, taking a bite of bacon and sipping his first cup of coffee. Sleep well, Mark? The smile on his face couldn't be mistaken. Ah, yes. Very well, thank you. Lauren started laughing at my discomfort. Relax, Mark. I already told the nosy one that you spent the night. So what are your intentions for my mother? Smartass. He grinned from ear to ear. Well, since you asked, I intend to get some bacon and coffee, and then take your mother to see that boat. Sit down and eat. You'll need your strength for later. Julian almost choked on his bacon. He knew exactly what Mom and I were up to, but such candor from his mother took him by surprise. We had a breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon, locally made salsa, toast with jam, and washed it all down with good dark coffee. Apparently, Julian decided he'd had enough of us, but breakfast was still a nice, family-like atmosphere. I guess after all these months of time together, it really was the beginning of a new family. Felt good, and I wouldn't trade that feeling for anything. Sometime later, after a few more strips of bacon and a few more cups of Lauren's excellent coffee, Julian announced that it was time for him to leave. I walked him to the door, and for the first time since I'd known him, I reached out my hand. He took it and gave me a hug. Welcome to the family, Mark. I know Mom is in good hands now. I hated to admit it, but tears came to my eyes as I watched Julian walk to his car. Are you two doing okay? I turned around and saw Lauren standing behind me, smiling. Yes, we're doing fine. From that morning on, Lauren and I rarely slept apart, and if we did, it was usually because one of us was working late or traveling. Julian seemed to make no effort to keep our secret, and soon my daughters started calling and asking leading questions like, if I need to talk to you tonight, where will you be? The first time I heard this, I didn't understand and panicked. What do you mean? Is everything okay? Is something wrong? This phrase became a constant refrain for both of my daughters. Since that first night, my life has only gotten bigger and more fulfilling. My girls started visiting more often and bringing their friends with them. They decided to spend another summer working in labs on campus but spent more and more time in San Diego. Lauren's daughter brought her family down for summer vacation. We had both a house and an apartment, and weekends when all the kids were in town required logistics that only the women could organize. Julian seemed to see my daughters as his sisters and their friends as potential dates. He began to look forward to their visits almost as much as I did. By the end of the summer, I knew what I wanted to do. There's a cute little jewelry store in La Jolla that's been there forever. The store isn't part of a national chain, and they make beautiful, one-of-a-kind jewelry. So I paid them a visit. It just so happened that the owner was nearing retirement and his daughter had taken over the business. She was especially helpful in helping me design the ring. A center stone with a flawless diamond and smaller stones on either side of it, on a slightly flattened band on top. It was the last weekend of summer, and the whole family was in town. The mood was elevated, and we decided to have a barbecue on the back patio. Steaks were grilled, salads were prepared, and beer and wine flowed freely. When everyone had finished their meal and conversation resumed, I called everyone to attention. If you'll pay attention to me for a moment, everyone here knows my story. A year ago, I was running from my problems. I ended up here with only my girls in the fall, and if I had lived the rest of my life with only these two jewels, I would have died a happy man. But things didn't turn out the way I expected. For the first time in my life, my clumsy nature has worked in my favor. This brought laughter from around the table. I met someone who changed my life. She made me smile again. She made me live again. And she doubled my family. I saw smiles all around the table. I've long thought that I must be the luckiest person in the world, and now I feel like I need to do something about it. With those words, I dropped to one knee. She gasped, "What are you doing?" Lauren was shaking like a leaf. "I'm doing something I've wanted to do for a long time. Lauren, you gave me my life back and made it better than it ever was. I know this is the life I want, today, tomorrow, and forever. I'm asking you to be my wife." The girls held their breath, and the men stared at their mother. "Yes, Mark, I will marry you." And with those words came cheers of approval, hugs, and I was a grinning fool. There were toasts and congratulations. Julian asked if his mom was pregnant, and all the girls rolled their eyes. Soon the women retired to the living room to make wedding plans, and Julian, Ethan, and I were left to watch the sunset. It was the end of August. They say it takes a year to plan a wedding, but we were married in just 2 months. It was late October, with the last of the fall colors still visible in the hills east of the city. I think a fall wedding is quite appropriate for a couple our age, but I'm not ready to consider that we're in the fall of our lives just yet. I'd envisioned a small wedding with family, but that didn't happen. As soon as word got out about it, the guest list took on a life of its own and grew from 20 people to over 100. Standing at the altar, I marveled at how my life had changed in just one short year. My parents, siblings, and Lauren were there. I guess we must have good genes because our parents were in their 70s and still going strong. My old friends from Seattle came, along with Lauren's friends, my new friends from work, and the sailing community. Even Vanessa's parents came to wish me well. Despite everything that had happened to their daughter, they never disowned me. It was a full house and lots of love. The reception was one for the record books. The evening air was perfect, and the party spilled out of the hall onto the patio. Like magic, new drinks appeared, and the band turned up the volume. Lauren and I stayed until sunset and quietly left while the party was in full swing. The next morning, we met for brunch with the closest family members. While Lauren and I felt great, some of them looked a little worse for wear. When I told the waitress I'd like scrambled eggs, 2 women ran off to the restroom. I gave up my apartment, and we settled into Lauren's house, but it was short-lived. We soon decided that while Lauren had many happy memories with this house, it also had too many difficult memories of her first marriage. We set out to find a house to call our own and settled on a 3-bedroom cottage with a large deck that could accommodate the whole family. Property right on the water was too expensive for us to consider, but a home in a coastal community 2 blocks from the water and overlooking the harbor was something we could afford. By spring, we'd upgraded the kitchen and heating system, and I was looking forward to a summer where my wife and I could leave work early, take the boat out before dinner, and watch the last boats return to their docks at sunset. It was then that I began to realize that my wife would forever surprise me. "Your parents are coming to visit for the 4th of July. Sounds like fun." They came for the holiday and stayed for 3 weeks. The girls would come every weekend with their usual group of friends, and Harper and her family would spend the holiday week too. It was crazy, but we managed. The couples took over the bedrooms, and the young people took over the sofas and sleeping bags. It was a wonderful vacation, and like every time, I missed them when they left. It is now 5 years after the wedding, and I could never have imagined my life today. My friends from Seattle come to visit every summer. Between friends and family, we rarely have an empty bedroom. My parents decided to become snowbirds. They spend winters with us in San Diego and summers in Seattle. Dad, who was in the Navy decades ago, took up sailing as if he was born to do it, and now we sail all summer on San Diego Bay and the waters off the Southern California coast. Mom and Lauren join us when they're not exploring antique stores and used bookstores along the coast. Lauren's parents have grown close to mine, and now they're spending the Seattle winters down in San Diego with us. Harper and Ethan had a second child, a son. When his company didn't want to transfer him back to California, he left them and found a new position here. After a few quick promotions, his career was doing better than if he'd stayed in Washington. Connor turned out to be a keeper, and a year after he and Sophia graduated, he asked my permission to marry my daughter. I readily approved, and they were married in June. Their first child was due in 2 months. Olivia has graduated and found a good job in San Diego. She brings her young man with her when she comes to visit, and I suspect we'll continue to see him around. Julian still plays the field, but Lauren is sure that when the right girl comes along, he'll fall hopelessly for her. Lauren, always surprising me, announced 2 summers ago that my former in-laws were coming to visit for the week of the 4th of July. I didn't expect this turn of events, but Lauren believes in building bridges, and they've always treated me with love. Turned out to be a delightful week. My parents were here, Lauren's parents came over, and the kids were in the house as often as they could be. I thought all of this was already as surreal as it could get, but Lauren had another surprise in store for me. "Have you ever seen it happen?" she asked one night. "Seen what happen? No, not in my wildest fantasies or worst nightmares did I expect this." In late July, she quietly and calmly sat me down at the table and announced that Vanessa would be staying with us the first weekend in August. "What? Your ex-wife is coming for the weekend? I know how you feel about her, but it's time to bury the hatchet for good. Your daughters need to know that their parents can get along, and she feels abandoned when the girls are here so much. And whose fault is that? I know, but it's time. She can't hurt you anymore." I'll admit there was a dark cloud hanging over our house for a few days after that, but eventually I got over it. It was just a weekend, right? I guess Vanessa was still lonely. I always knew Derek wasn't a keeper, and she realized it when he moved on to younger prospects. During the visit, she avoided any mention of Derek or our divorce, except to offer me what seemed like her only sincere apology. After all, we were getting along well enough that I saw brief glimpses of the girl I had once loved and married. Although Lauren had set out to establish some sort of friendship with Vanessa, I couldn't help but notice that she was unusually demonstrative that night when we went to bed. Always affectionate, Lauren was usually discreet enough to keep our intimacy private. That night, she made sure Vanessa knew I was happy. And here I am, living 800 miles from where I thought I would spend my life. My plans to become a ghost and disappear have failed miserably. I have a new life, a new wife, a family twice the size I imagined, with grandchildren and friends who enrich my life every day. I have love all around me, and it doesn't get any better than that. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.